Chapter 1 The Mission Begins. The cold glow of the containment chamber pulsed rhythmically, synchronized with the beating heart of time itself. The walls shimmered in translucent waves of blue and silver, energy rippling outward as the time anchor prepared to dislodge them from the present. Agent Elias Voss adjusted the strap on his temporal regulator, glancing at the countdown projected in glowing red numbers on his forearm display. 010, 009, 008. He took a deep breath. It never got easier. Across from him, Okada, the team's historical analyst, was trying to steady her breathing. Unlike the seasoned agents of the Chrono Division, she wasn't used to temporal jumps. This was only her second mission, and her first one had nearly ended in disaster when a minor mistake altered a sequence of events in 1893 Chicago. It had taken them 2 extra jumps to correct it, and she still wasn't convinced that what they were doing was entirely right. "You know," Rin muttered, adjusting the sleek device wrapped around her wrist, "every time we do this we risk creating something worse." Elias smirked, recognizing the hesitation in her voice. He had heard the same argument from a dozen historians before her. They always came in bright-eyed, idealistic, until they realized that history wasn't as delicate as they thought. It was fluid, shifting, and whether they liked it or not, people in the future had already been manipulating it for years. "Which is why we fix what breaks," he replied, his voice calm but firm. "Trust the system." "The system," Rin scoffed. "As if time cares about systems." Elias checked his forearm display again. 003, 002. "Too late for doubts now." "Hold tight," he said. The chamber's walls flickered, turning black as a void. The sensation hit like a tidal wave, being pulled through a tunnel of light and shadow, weightless yet dense at the same time. Elias clenched his jaw, resisting the nausea that came with every jump. The air vibrated, an electric charge pressing against his skin. His ears popped as the pressure shifted. Then in an instant, the world around them snapped into place. 1962, Washington, D.C. The scent of cigarette smoke and whiskey filled the air, mingling with the low hum of jazz playing from a distant corner. The bar was dimly lit, its mahogany counters polished smoothly from years of careless hands. Men in suits leaned over their drinks, exchanging whispered deals, while waitresses weaved between tables balancing trays of scotch and bourbon. Elias adjusted the collar of his blazer, blending seamlessly into the era. A quick glance at the ornate clock behind the bar told him they had arrived precisely 14 minutes before the event. Their target, Howard Kessler. A low-ranking government consultant, Kessler, was about to receive a classified document from an unknown informant. At first glance it seemed like an insignificant exchange, one of hundreds that took place in Washington's shadowy backrooms. But decades later, that document would resurface, falling into the hands of a radical scientist who would use its information to develop a predictive war algorithm in 2075. That algorithm would fail spectacularly. Nations acting on false projections of their enemies' movements would engage in a preemptive strike. A world war would begin, leading to the deaths of nearly 1 billion people before the dust settled. It all started here. All they had to do was make sure Kessler never received that document. The setup. Rin moved first, blending into the background as she took a seat at a booth near the entrance. From here she had a clear view of Kessler, a slightly overweight man in his mid-40s with a receding hairline. He sat hunched over a whiskey glass, drumming his fingers against the rim, oblivious to the fact that history was watching him. Elias made his way to the bar, taking a seat 2 stools away from Kessler. He nodded at the bartender, ordering a bourbon, careful to appear as just another businessman unwinding after a long day. Through his earpiece, he heard Rin's voice. "Target identified. The informant should be arriving in 3 minutes." Elias exhaled slowly, loosening his shoulders. It was all about timing. He glanced around, noting the security risks. There was a bouncer by the door, a thick-necked man who looked like he could break ribs without trying. 2 men in trench coats sat in a booth near the back, their eyes flicking across the room, possibly FBI or CIA. The informant wouldn't risk approaching Kessler if too many people were watching. Elias checked his watch. 2 minutes. His mind raced through the possible complications. If Kessler became too suspicious, he might arrange another meeting. If the informant got spooked, he could leak the information to someone else. They had to ensure that neither of those things happened. Backup plan, he murmured. A pause. Then her voice said, we could use a disruptor. If we plant it on Kessler, it'll erase the last 10 minutes of his memory once he leaves. Elias nodded slightly. A clean approach. No violence, no mess. Just a minor gap in memory. But first, they had to prevent the document from changing hands. The intervention. The informant arrived on schedule, a man in his early 50s, dressed in a gray suit with a fedora tilted low over his face. He carried himself with the kind of forced nonchalance that screamed, I don't belong here. Elias saw the moment Kessler noticed him. A flicker of recognition. A stiffening of posture. The informant hesitated at the bar before making his way toward Kessler's table, his hand slipping into his coat pocket. Elias acted. He stood taking 2 casual steps forward, and just as the informant reached Kessler, Elias stumbled, knocking his glass off the counter. The bourbon spilled in a golden arc, splashing across Kessler's sleeve. Damn it! Kessler cursed, jerking backward. Sorry about that, Elias said, grabbing a napkin from the counter. He leaned in slightly as he patted Kessler's arm dry, and in that brief second, his other hand slipped a small silver device into Kessler's coat pocket. The disruptor activated silently. Kessler, still grumbling, turned his attention to cleaning himself off, momentarily distracted. The informant, startled by the interruption, glanced around nervously, as if suddenly realizing how public this exchange was. I should go, the man muttered, retreating toward the door. Kessler frowned, watching him leave, confusion clouding his expression. He opened his mouth as if to call him back, then hesitated. The spill had disrupted the rhythm, thrown off the moment. And just like that, the event was altered. Rin's voice crackled through the earpiece. Nice work. He's going to forget this whole thing in 5 minutes. Elias gave a small nod, stepping away from the table. Mission complete. Or so he thought. Because as they left the bar, a man in the corner, a shadowy figure Elias hadn't noticed before, watched them go. And then, slowly, he pulled out a device that did not belong in 1962.